Good morning. I'm so excited to share this episode with you because this is when we're going to do all of the dyeing on all of the elements on the gourd. Here we go. All right, so now is the difficult part. We've got to decide what colors we want where. On a side note, I have to tell you something funny. I just realized that my apron has a Velcro here. I'll tell you, if I ever have to buy another apron, and I just started wearing an apron because I'm tired of ruining my clothes with dyes and paints and things like that. I had this apron, but I didn't know about the Velcro, but I would have to say, if you get an apron, either see if it has Velcro or even if it has a button there, this makes it so easy, so you can just, when you need, you can take it off. You can put it on so easily. I definitely need to look for an apron like this. If I find any, I'll leave a link below. But back to the topic at hand. We know we're going to be skinning out this part of the gourd. So what I want you to do is I want you to figure out what colors do you want to dye here, what color do you want to dye here, and what color do you want to dye here. What we should do is first we should put our dye in the circle and in these two bands, and it's okay if it bleeds over a little bit onto here because we're going to be taking the skin off. However, if you're going with a lighter color here, you don't want to bleed it over onto here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lighter color here, and then I'm going to go with an even darker color in this area. So if I do accidentally bleed over, that will be okay. So I'm going to select some dyes now. I have a whole bunch of these forceps, and I'll leave links to these below. And what I use them for is they're the kind that actually have a little locking mechanism there, and so you can click them together and then hold on to a piece of felt. And I'm going to be using a piece of felt to put my dye colors. I've got all my dyes together in a box because if anything were to happen and anyone were to leak, I don't want it to get all over the place. I can leave you a link to this box as well. I have some small dyes and then some large dyes. These are all Adirondack dyes. And I want to go for, I know that in here, I'm going to have dark brown on the cattails. I know that the grasses are going to be green, so it's going to be brown, green, and a cream color. So I want something this color just a little bit darker, or do I want to go darker here and then lighter there? What do you think? What do you want to do? Do you want darker than lighter, or lighter than darker? I think I want a nice frame, maybe almost a mahogany color frame, something nice and dark. And you can use anything imaginable. You can use cotton swabs, Q-tips, anything you like. I just happen to use these bits of felt because they're easy to control, and I can just like that. The other thing you can do is you can also use a paintbrush. And the nice thing about having our edge wood burned like that is that the dye should not run over into the other area. Should not. Okay, I was going to say this was either espresso or cappuccino. This one is espresso. I think I want to look up a couple pieces of pottery and just see what kind of colors would look good around this. And I want to look at an example of one that I did before and just decide whether I want light dark or dark light. So give me a second. So the quickest place I could look for reference was on my business card. And what I see is that when I've done these before, I haven't actually done much with the color there, which surprises me. I left that opportunity unturned. And so I'm wondering, how would it look if I did a bit of a red to bring the red out on the head? And the tail's kind of grayish and brownish and all of that. Their legs are a little bit skinny. I wonder if I should do some thicker legs. I probably should thicken the legs a bit. They have a white spot here, red spot here. Yeah, I think I need to go with something a little bit darker. Maybe a little bit darker. Let's experiment. I don't know if I want to go blood red though. This one doesn't say what color red it is. The espresso just seems a little dark. Cappuccino, whatever that one was called. Alright, on this one I decided I really wanted it to be a dark brown for the frame, and so I have, this ink is a Ranger ink, an Adirondack ink, and it does not say what color it is anywhere on here. Nowhere does it say. Why do they do that? But it's not the espresso, it's a little bit lighter, and I'm just using a really soft brush so I can kiss up to the edge because I think I want this part a little bit darker, and I want the other part a little bit more honey. This gourd is so light colored that it needs a bit of color. It's just so light, and it's so porous, but with the brush I can put the color exactly where I want it. Look at that, it's soaking this in. So I'm going to go all the way around on the outside edge, and then I'll go all the way around on the inside edge, and then I'm going to use a heat gun to really, really make sure it is set, and I might even spray it so it doesn't get chipped. So the color's really taking up there, not as much down here because it's a lot more porous up there. So this might give it a kind of a nice, like a variegated look even, which is not a bad thing. But I'm finding I'm having to go over twice because this one is so porous, which is interesting because this is one of the ones that had a lot of oil coming out when I was wood burning. Kind of a strange phenomenon. And see here, the ink is just sitting on top. It's not really even going in. So it's not at all porous here, but this part of the gourd that must have been up more toward the sun is a lot more porous and taking a lot more ink. Okay, now I need to go the other way. And even though I say it'll be okay if we get some in there, I'm going to try and be careful anyway so I have less work later. I don't want to have to grind super, super deep just because I slipped. Okay, that's going to be a nice contrast. That is probably the color I will use for the cattails. And I might even use dye for the cattails rather than paint. Just have to see how that would look. Wow, the colors practically disappeared down here, because it is just not accepting it. It's not drawing any of it in. It's just sitting on top. I feel like I can go over this some more and put some more color on it. I'm using my brush right down to where it's pretty dry, just so that I don't have a lot of runny looking spots. Right, so you're going to want to do the circle, and if you have opted to do the back part, then also going to do the back part just using the same technique, just kissing right up to the top line, and then flip it over and kiss right up to the bottom line, and then fill in. So kissing up to the top line like that. Kissing right up to the bottom line like that. And then just filling in. So we're going to do that all the way around. All right, I've got another color that I am using for the bottom so that there's some good contrast. It's an Adirondack ink with no name on it. It's kind of a caramel, I would say. So what I'm doing is I'm using the forceps, and I'm putting a pretty good amount on there. And then I'm simply kind of working my way up to that line and getting rid of a little of the ink before I get up to that line. Yeah, I'm practically holding my breath, and I'm just working my way up to that line and worrying that the dark is not dark enough to differentiate, but we'll see once it dries how it looks. Let's see if we need to go any darker. Now, of course, if you have a gourd that's got really pretty color, you don't have to dye it at all. This one just was a little bit lackluster. Just was kind of a pale color, a sickly gourd. So, of course, I want it to be a lot more golden. I want it to be almost a pecan color. Some dyes are really funny. When you go over them, they'll make a little bit of stripey bit, and you just have to go over them again and again. And that's one thing where the cloth is a really good idea, because it's not like a brush where you get lines. And you would think that you're wasting a lot in here, but you're actually not. There are also stamp pads you can get where you just put a little piece of this on a bit of the grippy part from Velcro, and those are nice too. And it's amazing how you can squeeze all the ink right out of them. This gourd is just a little bit unusual because it's got so much, I think it had sun damage. It didn't wear any sunscreen. You see where that gets you. So I'm just working at making a consistent color, which is really difficult because the gourd has different hardnesses in different places and different porousness in different places. So this one's really hard to get one consistent color on, because some areas are accepting more dye and some areas are accepting less. It's just the way it is. It's nature. It's natural. It's not perfect. Or you could say it's absolutely perfect. But this is what it's supposed to be. Natural. Because my feature front is right at the spot with the most sun damage. So that's the spot with the most discoloration because of it accepting the dye in different amounts. There's really not going to be a way to make this completely uniform because of the skin. That's okay. That's what we would say gives it all of its charm, right? It's amazing that all of the ink comes right off here. Going both ways to make sure I don't have lines in it. Sometimes it seems the more you buff it, the smoother it gets. I have just a little bit in here. And there we are. You can definitely see a color difference, so I like that. Now I'm going to hit this with the heat gun and just make sure it is completely set and also look for any irregularities. All right, well, I had the wet brush. I went ahead and I did just the cattails, and I also remembered to do the cattails on the front. So I've got the cattails done. Next, I think I'm going to go ahead and put the green in on there. This brush worked out really well, and I'm going to pick a pretty dark green so I don't have to go over several times. So I've got one called Pesto. That might work pretty well. I did have to go over these cattails 3 times, and I also held like this so that as I distributed the ink, it had a chance just to sit there and not go anywhere and dry for a moment or two before I turned it. So I just went like that, so it would get good saturation to match the bands. Okay, so now I'm just kind of wetting the brush, and this brush might be a little bit too thick. We'll have to see. I definitely have too much ink on it. Thank goodness we're pulling away everything else, right? Okay, so too much ink. I think painting this grass first is really going to help me see which areas I need to skin off and which areas to keep. And that one's not a good example because I just really ruined it too much. And I should work this way since I'm using my pinky to plant. I feel like this pesto just is not, it's just not green enough. Let's try a different color. Let's try something brighter. Okay, here's another Adirondack ink with no name on it, but it looks more like a spring green. Maybe a brighter green. No, doesn't look very green. I think I'm going to try a different brush. I'm just getting kind of muddy colors, and I think it's because of the brown of the gourd. Go with the super bright spring green. It's just the gourd is so brown, which means I might not be able to use an ink dye on this. I might just have to use paint. And that's okay too. Not green enough. Meadow. Meadow sounds very green. Try meadow. Too much meadow. Well, it looks like meadow is fairly green, but it's not the frog green that these actually are. So although I like the look of this, it looks kind of like old McCoy pottery or something in that nature. I'll go ahead and do it, but I just think I like the bright green better. So I'll just quickly put it on there in case when we get the background off, maybe it'll pop a little more and look better. But until then, I'm going to reserve judgment. And I'm going to anticipate painting these with a brighter green. I'm going outside the lines a little tiny bit, but not much. I'm kind of actually liking this now, the shade of green that I'm getting. Because it does look sort of like McCoy pottery. It's very subtle. And it might end up, this is the final color. I don't know yet. I have to see. I know I'll spray it, so that if I put something on top of it and I don't like it, I can take it right off. I'm going to spray these. And I'm not being completely careful to stay in the lines because I'm going to be taking the background off anyway. So this is the Adirondack ink called Meadow. And it's looking pretty good. Like I said, it's very subtle, and the gourd is so brown, so tannish, that dyes can enhance the color, but or she can end up with that muddy look from yellow and green, turning to a bit of a brown. Once the background is out, it might look absolutely fantastic, and it might look like nothing Just deepening it a little bit in a few spots. Somehow there was a bit of a drip, which probably means I should be holding it more like this. I don't want to get any of the green on the brown. I'm okay with getting the green on the background because that's going to be skimmed off. I'm seeing what I can do about deepening it just a little bit. This is kind of fun because I know I'm going to be taking those other parts off, so I don't have to be quite as careful. This might turn out great. Okay, can't forget these. Alright, I'm really liking the green. It is going to be spectacular and it's going to pop out like crazy once we take that background off. Alright, I think I'm going to tape the birds just to make sure that when I clear coat that I don't get anything on them. I'm just going to use some really wide painter's tape, and mainly when I clear coat, I just don't want to get a bunch of paint on the birds because I want to reserve for myself the ability to dye them if I decide I want to use dye on them. I don't think I will. I think I'll be using paint, but whichever it is, I want that first bit to be able to soak in. Okay, there we go. So now I can do a clear coat and not worry about accidentally getting them. I'll be back in a minute. I sprayed this gourd, and now that I see it, I am so glad that I'm going to be taking the skin off here. The colors are just really going to pop. And when I sprayed it, even though it was a matte finish, the color, it's a really interesting color, but it's very uneven. So I'm really glad that we're going to be salvaging it by pulling all of this off of there. So that's the next step, is going to be to remove the skin, and this could take quite a while, but we're going to be using a really fantastic bit. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned a lot of tips and techniques for when you are dyeing. Next, we are going to be removing the skin with the saber-tooth burr, so get your hearing protection ready. See you in the next one. Bye!